The mansion of Richard Hale, a 45-year-old billionaire CEO of Hale Technologies, was as magnificent as the empire he had built, stretching across industries from artificial intelligence to biotechnology, but behind the shimmering glass walls and golden chandeliers lived a man weighed down by a crisis that threatened to dismantle everything he had created. For his company was facing a staggering $200 million technical roadblock that not even his brightest engineers, consultants, or partners could untangle, and the deadline for unveiling a revolutionary product was only weeks away, a deadline on which the company's survival and stock price depended. Every meeting in the boardroom had ended in frustration, every late-night brainstorming session yielded no breakthrough, and investors were beginning to whisper doubts about Richard's genius, yet while his high-profile colleagues and highly paid specialists wrestled with algorithms, formulas, and endless charts, Richard's attention was unexpectedly captured by the quietest figure in his household, a young maid named Elena, who had been working in his home for barely 6 months, arriving from a humble background with little more than determination, dignity, and an unusual spark in her eyes that most overlooked, and though Richard barely noticed her at first, one evening, while buried in documents sprawled across the marble kitchen counter, he overheard her humming softly as she wiped the table, glancing unintentionally at the complex equations on his laptop, and then, almost too casually, she muttered under her breath, "Why don't they just reverse the sequence and simplify the mapping? It's symmetrical," words that struck Richard like thunder in the silence, because what she had whispered was the essence of a solution his entire R&D department had failed to conceive despite months of work. Stunned, he looked at her and demanded sharply what she had said, causing Elena to freeze with the rag still in her hand, embarrassed and apologetic, insisting she had only been talking to herself. But Richard pressed harder, inviting her to explain, and reluctantly, with cheeks flushed, she began to sketch her thoughts on a scrap of paper towel, writing out numbers, arrows, and sequences with surprising clarity, and as he read her scribbles, Richard felt his pulse quicken, for in those messy lines lay the skeleton of a formula that could dismantle the $200 million problem in mere minutes. Astonished, he called his CTO that very night, sent photos of Elena's scribbles, and within an hour, the entire technical team confirmed that her approach worked flawlessly, something they had overlooked in their tunnel vision. Richard could hardly believe it. His maid, with no formal education beyond community college, had cracked the code that his PhDs could not, and in that moment, his perception of her shifted from invisible household staff to a mind that could change the destiny of Hale Technologies itself. But as remarkable as this revelation was, it posed an even bigger question for Richard. What should he do next? How would he explain this to his board, his investors, his employees, and most importantly, to Elena, who stood trembling before him as though guilty of overstepping her role, unaware that her brilliance had just saved a company worth billions? Richard's instincts as a leader told him this was not to be buried but celebrated, yet his pride, his reputation, and his empire's image all balanced on the fragile choice he would make next. And little did Elena know that her life was about to change forever, catapulting her from the shadows of obscurity into the blinding spotlight of corporate history, where power, jealousy, admiration, and betrayal would collide, for genius often emerges from the unlikeliest places, and those who recognize it have the power to transform not just a company, but the world. And as the night deepened, Richard leaned back in his chair, eyes fixed on Elena with a mixture of awe and conflict, realizing this was only the beginning of a story that would shake not just his company, but the entire business world to its core. Subscribe to our channel now, because what happens in Chapter 2 will leave you speechless, as Elena's hidden genius collides with corporate politics, ambition, and an unexpected twist that no one saw coming, a twist that reveals the true price of brilliance when it is discovered in the most unlikely of hands, and the shocking decision Richard makes next will challenge every idea of power, loyalty, and destiny you've ever known.